Gardevoir is, for better or worse, one of the most popular Pokemon in the franchise. So today, I wanted to beat Pokemon Infinite Fusion using only Gardevoir fusions. I make over 30 Gardevoir combinations in this video, so if you want to see them all, then stick around and let me know if you have any cool Gardevoir fusions that I might have missed. Well, let's begin. I start today's adventure off by picking my starter. None of these are Gardevoir, but for now, Charmander will have to do. Normally I would pick Bulbasaur, but I'm playing on modern mode, and this has changed the gym's typing, so Charmander seems to be the best pick for now. So TLDR, I'm a dirty little tryhard. I'll skip a lot of this early game and jump right into the fun. In Route 2, we can find Rolts. And I'm even lucky enough to find a Rolts Fletchling fusion. I then catch a few more Rolts for the road, and now it's time to fuse. I start with Charmander and make Rolmander. Its little psychic flames are adorable. I then fuse Shinx and Rolts to create, well, I can't read that out loud in fear of demonetization, but this fusion is definitely adorable, and later down the road it will look amazing. I then go to the secret garden so I can fuse Eevee into the Cuddly Eats, and then Riolu into Ralu. These fusions are absolutely adorable, but let's see how they face up against Brock. In modern mode, he's a steel type trainer. He leads with Shroomnard, and a single Ember is able to one-shot the Grass Steel type fusion. Next is Steel Jr., which might have caused problems, but Ember is able to burn it, halving its attack, and from there a few more Embers are able to finish it off. While heading to Mount Moon, Charmander evolves into Charmeleon, which looks just as good as its previous form. The Shinx fusion thankfully evolves into something more family friendly. Unfortunately though, the Rolt side of the Rolmander fusion has evolved and it's ruined possibly everything. I then run into Team Rocket and their disturbing experiment. They force the scientists to fight me, and this guy has some super cool Nosepass fusions. Mainly this Mudpass. I love this little mech, it reminds me of Gurren Lagann. This battle was pretty easy thanks to Ralu's fighting moves, and then we hit level 20 so it evolves, but I do not even know what's happening here. Once I've made it to Cerulean, I'm able to reverse this fusion to make it a lot more appealing. I then reverse Luxio as well, but I made it worse. So I reverse it back. And while I'm here, I also reverse Charmeleon into Charlia, and it looks a bit awkward, but much better than before. The Luxio Curlier fusion is still looking decent enough, and the update ends with Elia, the fluffy Curlier fusion. With all of those out of the way, it's time to take on my rival. He leads with Cottonix, and this is a bad matchup for my own Luxio fusion, so I switch into Charlia, who is able to burn up the grass fusion with Firefang. Solo V is next, but thanks to a high roll, 2 Firefangs are able to knock it out. Feebas comes in third for my rival, so I bring in my electric Lulia, who one-shots it with Spark. His last Pokemon is a Bug Steel fusion, so Charlia returns to the battle and knocks it out with Firefang. With my rival defeated, it's time to take on Misty, but she's much stronger in modern mode. I start with Riolia as she leads with Glarogue, who starts things off with Fake Out, doing a decent chunk and flinching us. It then lives with red HP from a Force Palm and sets up the Hail. Misty then heals the scrappy Ice type with a Super Potion, and I bring it back to red HP, but then it dodges the next Force Palm and slows me down with an Icy Wind. It then misses as well, so I'm able to land a Force Palm to take it out, but her next Pokemon was too mighty. Manras knocks Riolia out with a Wing Attack, and then I bring in my starter, but it falls to a combo of Icy Wind and Bubble Beam. I then lost this battle again, but eventually I wise it up and change up my lineup. I lead with Riolia and land a Force Palm, but Glarogue retaliates with 2 Icy Winds knocking us out. With Riolia out for the count, it was time to send in my secret weapon, Lulia. I finished Glarogue off with a Spark, bringing in the monster Manras. I set up a charge to increase my Spark's power on the next turn, as it hits an Icy Wind and then a Wing Attack, as my Spark brings it into the red. Luckily I also paralyze it, so Lilia outspeeds and finishes things off with another Spark, earning my second badge. I make my way to Bill and I unfuse him like the good guy I am, and he gives me the SS Ann ticket in return for my good deeds. While enjoying my holiday, I'm ambushed by my rival. But this was an easy battle as Charlia takes out his first 2 Pokemon, while Lulia finishes off his last 2 members. I then picks up the captain and his sore tummy with some less than wholesome rubs, and before taking on Lieutenant Surge, I make some more fusions. starting with this adorable Curlier Azumarill fusion. This Ivysaur fusion kinda reminds me of that chick from Hey Arnold, but I don't know why. I then fused Curlier and Duskull, and this fusion was more of a color change than anything else, but the colors definitely suit it well. I then fused Roselia to make this stumpy little fusion, and its goofiness won me over pretty quickly. Speaking of goofy fusions, this curlier Gyarados fusion looks pretty damn funny. I then had to see what a Pikachu fusion would look like, and yeah, it's pretty good. With a team of new fusions, I'm more than ready to take on Lieutenant Surge. He leads with this disturbing nose key, and I'm able to fire off a few draining kisses, but it's left on 1 HP, and then he heals it up with a potion. Surge then switches and brings in Fletch Chop. I bring in Piccolo, but it can't take the heat as 2 flame charges knocks her out. I bring in my Azumarill fusion, who finishes the bird off with an Aqua Tail, bringing in Houndblade. An awesome looking fusion, but despite its good looks, it can't tank more than 2 Play Roughs, leaving him with his nose key, and Play Rough leaves it on legit 1 HP, but then it outspeeds and finishes us off with a Seismic Toss. I'm able to bring in Dulia and finish off that last HP with a Shadow Sneak, and with that, I've beaten the 3rd gym leader. While in Rock Tunnel, my stumpy little Roselia fusion evolved, but it's horrifying. I do reverse it and it does look a lot better, but I'm actually not sure if this is still a custom fusion or not. My Azumarill fusion also evolves into its final form, and thankfully it doesn't become a horrific monster and keeps its elegance. Dulia is next to evolve, but once again it's just a color change. Pikavore hasn't changed much either, but still looks pretty damn good. I finally make it out of Rock Tunnel and to Lavender Town, and I go check out the Pokemon Tower where my rival is ready to pounce me again. Kurdos takes out Wixio with a couple of Ice Fangs, and I bring in Azumarill, but his Ninjask Pineyard fusion U-turns into Duo V. A Bubble Beam and Play Rough does take it out, but it does set up a Trick Room. I then Play Rough Axgon for a clean knockout, and then his Ninard gets taken out by an Aqua Tail, and Litzel falls to the same attack, leaving him with Slugbass. But a Bubble Beam puts an end to it pretty quickly. Kurdos evolves into the most unique fusion so far, and this Gyarados looks pretty damn dope. Team Rocket is harassing the elderly, and I personally don't think that's very nice, so I go after them, but I can't continue without a Silph Scope. Before chasing after that though, I've got some more evolving to do, starting with Charbor. It still looks a bit silly, but hopefully that will change later with its final form. This Luxray Gardevoir fusion, however, looks awesome and is definitely one of my favorite fusions from this run. Evil is looking just as cute as before, and the Lucario was looking pretty strong, so hopefully it'll live up to its looks. This Zoroark fusion was looking pretty clean as well, and I even tried its reverse form, but I prefer the first one. Gardevoir Snorlax made this adorable Gardilax, and with some upgraded fusions, I think it was about time to take on Giovanni. His team was pretty threatening in modern mode, like his lead, the Pimp of Pollution, Haunchsing. Gardevoir trades blows, forcing him to use a max potion, but eventually we lose the standoff as Sludge Bomb crits. I bring in Lucavore, who is able to finish it off with an Aura Sphere. This brings in his horrifying Kecleon and Rhyperior fusion, and it changes its typing with Protean, switching to the Ghost type, so my Aura Sphere isn't very effective. Lucavore then lands a weak Psychic before falling to a Thunder Punch, and then Luxvore joins the battle, and with enough Draining Kiss spam, I'm able to take out the monster. Smeargle was next, but a Draining Kiss breaks its disguise, showing that it was actually a Persian Zoroark fusion. It U-turns out and brings in the real Smeargle. It flinches Luxvore with Fake Out, and then after I land an attack, it uses Spore, putting me to sleep. Luxvore does eventually wake up, but a Destiny Bond then takes us both out, leaving his Zoishin. I want to test my own Zoroark fusion, but a super effective U-turn puts an end to that pretty quickly, so I bring in Evor, who finally ends the battle with a Draining Kiss. Giovanni runs away, leaving behind the Silph Scope. Before going back to the Pokemon Tower though, I think we should take on Erika. But before I face off with her, I decide to do some more fusing. I start with Gardevoir, and it was an interesting looking fella to say the least. I then fuse Gardevoir and Golbat, and this was another funky fusion, but I definitely enjoyed its funky attitude. With that out of the way, I get ready to take on Erika, and she leads with this amazing Typhlosion Scyther fusion, but 2 Bubble Beams easily take it out. Her Galvantula Kangaskhan fusion was next, and it was adorable, especially with the little Joltix around it, but I didn't find its Dizzy Punches all that cute as they knock out Azumarill. I bring in Charbor, and with 2 Flame Bursts I knock it out, but not without being left on 8 HP from Dizzy Punch. Her Butterfree fusion was last, and I was ready to sack Charbor, but a not very effective U-turn leaves us on 1 HP, and a Flame Burst one-shots it, earning me my 4th badge. Thanks to the XP from Erika, my starter evolves into its final form, and I'm definitely not disappointed. this fusion looks pretty clean. I then evolve my Ivysaur into its final form, and once again this fusion looks pretty good. I did try the reverse fusions of these two, but they did look a little bit too awkward for my liking. This Crobat fusion, however, is just the right amount of awkward that it's kinda charming. I then fuse Brain and Brawn, but this kinda reminds me of Mega Medicham, so I reverse it, and this one was way more funny. I fused Doublade and Gardevoir to make the dual-wielding Duoball, and this Gardevoir Lampert fusion was too adorable to leave in the box. I climb the Pokemon Tower and the Silph Scope reveals the horrifying Bandslash. I might be having nightmares tonight. Thankfully, Charbor is able to send it back to its resting place with a couple of Flame Bursts, and with nothing left in my way, I'm able to save the old man and get the Pokeflute, which leads me to Koga. He leads with Terra, but after a Draining Kiss, it's revealed to actually be a Zoroark Runiculus fusion, so another Draining Kiss from Luxvor knocks it out. Weeflame is second, but 2 Draining Kisses make quick work of it, and then Haunchvor is third, but once again Draining Kiss is more than enough to take it out, leaving him with his real Terra. Luxvor has run out of Draining Kiss PP though, so I bring in Gardevoir, who finishes the battle off with 2 low sweeps, earning me a pretty easy 5th badge. The fighting doesn't end however, as I once again have to deal with Giovanni, but before I can teach him a lesson, my rival volunteers for a beating. Our Luxray fusions scrap a little, but I end up bringing in Charbor. The Luxcott dips out with a Bolt Slash, bringing in Rupion. We exchange blows for a while, but I'm forced to switch, though I accidentally bring in the wrong fusion, though I do eventually bring in the right one, my Gardilax, who is able to put an end to this annoying fusion with a couple of body slams. Ninard is next, and I try to bring in Charbor, but thanks to Ninjask's speed boost, it outspeeds and knocks my starter out. I bring in Lampvor, but he switches into his own Lampert fusion, and his Flash Fire eats my Flame Burst, but it gets burned, so a Hex on the next turn one-shots it. Lampvor then takes out Ninard, and Luxcott barely survives, so I'm forced to bring in Duoball, and it has some trouble, but it eventually is able to knock it out. Magtic is next, so I switch back into Lampvor as it hits a Toxic on the switch, but my Synchronize poisons it right back, and this allows me to hit an Empowered Hex before getting knocked out by a Surf. I bring in Luxvor, who finishes it off with a Spark, and then one-shots his Faragon with Draining Kiss. With some big battles out of the way, I decide it's time to fuse some Pokemon. I start things off with this Slacking fusion, and it's definitely more slack than Vor. I then fuse Aggron and Gardevoir, and its head's just a little bit too big, but I do appreciate it. This Metagross fusion, however, looks near perfect. It's so goddamn cool. This Megavore looked ready to party, but I won't be putting it on the team because it's just kind of looks a little bit too weak. Gardevoir is another fusion where I'm not really too sure what I'm looking at, and I finish the batch off with this Gengar fusion, which is a little horrifying but should hopefully be a pretty strong Pokemon. I try to show off Gardevoir's power, but as I try to set up Coal Mine, Sylvosion lowers my special attack with Moonblast twice. It then sets up a light screen, so I try to do as much damage as I can before Hyper Beam finishes me off. I bring in Metavore, who hits a Meteor Mash on the recharge turn, but then it fires off a nasty Lava Plume. Thankfully I do live, and one more Meteor Mash knocks it out. Metavore then lands a Bullet Punch on Marikyu before falling to a Boomerang. I bring in Slackbore, who is able to burn a couple of her max potions with Psychics, but eventually an Earthquake takes her out. Thankfully a Flamethrower from Charizard easily finishes it off. Next is Driftbill, but I wall it pretty hard, so 3 Flamethrowers take it out. Clefix is last, but 1 Flamethrower is able to knock it out thanks to a burn. With access to more evolution stones, I'm able to evolve a few fusions, starting with Evor, who I evolve into Silvor with a shiny stone. I then make possibly my favourite fusion, Mismavore, though I am a sucker for witch hats. I then make my own Haunchvor, but I prefer the Mismagius fusion. And then next is Agivore, who looks pretty cool as well. This Roserade fusion looks kinda wild, but I am definitely a fan. I then finish these stone fusions off with Shandyvore, a top contender for my favourite fusion design. With those updates out of the way, I think it's time to take on Blaine. He leads with Klinkfarig, as I lead with Mismavore, and a Shadow Ball is barely unable to one-shot, leaving it on red HP. This allows him to set up a shift gear, and I do land another Shadow Ball as he full restores, sending its HP back into the red. But thanks to the stat boost, it outspeeds next turn, and one-shots Mesmeril with a Gear Grind. Thankfully, Agivore has the priority Shadow Sneak, which is able to finish it off. I then set up 2 Swords Dances, which allows Shadow Sneak to 2-shot both his Hypno and Xatu fusion and his Togekiss Relunicus fusion. Allosaur however has a bit more bulk to him, so it's able to live and take Agivore out, but a Flame Burst from Shandivore is able to knock him out for good. Next on the to-do list is taking down Team Rocket's triple fusion, but I'll need some new Pokemon to take it on, like this adorable Electivire, whose electric typing should come in handy. I also fused Magneton, but I don't think it will join the battle, so I kind of lied, I only really made 1 fusion for the next battle. But now I need to take down Molzapkuno. I start with Gardevoir, who takes down the Zapdos head with Destiny Bond, making this a 2-on-1. I then bring in Agbor and I hit a double Rock Slide, but thanks to the held Charty Berries, it does pitiful damage, and then an Ice Beam Flamethrower combo takes him out. I then bring in Luxvor, who is able to take out the Moltres head with 2 Sparks, before being knocked out by Articuno's Ice Beam. I send in Electivire next, who is able to finish the beast off with 2 more Thunderbolts, and just like that, Giovanni has been humiliated by a 10-year-old once again. But hey, one more round of Let's Embarrass Giovanni never hurt anyone, so let's go again. This time though, we aren't fighting over his crimes, I'm fighting for my 8th badge. His lead Kekgon looks pretty threatening, so I try to take it out with an Aura Sphere, but it turns out it's his Zoroark fusion. It lives on 1 HP, and because I know he'll want to use a Full Restore, I freely set up Coal Mind. He then sends in Polylurk, who phases through my fighting type attack, so I use this chance to set up a couple more Coal Minds, and then take out his Ghost type with 2 Draining Kisses. This brings in the quite depressing Kukan, but an Aura Sphere puts it out of its misery, but he then pranks me again with a U-turn into yet another Ghost type. He brings Kekgon back out, but I'm pranked once again with a U-turn into yet another Ghost type, his Smeargle. It's able to outspeed and seals our fate with Destiny Bond as we take each other out. Gardevoir is then able to take out the remaining 2 Pokemon with Cross Shrubs, earning me my last gym badge. And this of course brings us to the Elite Four. Before taking on Lorelei, I fused Bishop and Gardevoir, creating Beevor. And I also reversed my Meganium fusion, and I'm a much bigger fan of this form, and with my team assembled, it's time for our first Elite battle. I lead with my new Meganium form and get to +5 with Coal Mind against her Politoed and Polion fusion, and after burning all of her 4 restores, 2 magical leaves knock it out. I then take King Drio out with a Moonblast, her Mimikyu Gyarados fusion then lives on 1 HP, but thanks to a second Quick Claw proc, I'm able to finish it off with yet another Moonblast. Swampray also lives on 1 HP because this game hates me a little, and because I misclicked. It thankfully does fall to the Life Orb damage, and so when Spiramuku comes out, I'm able to fend it off with 2 discharges from Luxvor. Last is her Milotina, but thanks to it missing all of its attacks, Luxvor is able to knock out the legendary fusion with Moonblasts. I mess up against Bruno leading pretty poorly, so I let his Tyranitar Talonflame knock out my lead. It however does KO with U-turn, giving me the advantage in terms of switch order as he sends out Croray. I bring in Beevor, who is able to knock it out with 2 Night Slashes after setting up with a Swords Dance. His armor top sadly does outspeed and knocks out Beevor with Stone Edge. I bring in Gyarados, who is able to knock it out with 3 Surfs, but she's left on 2 HP from Sandstorm Chip. Trine Flame comes back out, but I outspeed and finish it off with a Surf, but the Sandstorm Chip proves to be too much, taking out Gyarados. Mismavor is then able to bring his Probodon low with 2 Shadow Balls before falling to a Magnet Bomb. A Flamethrower from Charbor is able to burn up its remaining HP as Bruno sends out Octistar. But 2 magical leaves deal with it pretty quickly, and his last Marowak Rhyperior fusion falls to the same order of attacks. Next is Agatha, an extremely annoying trainer. I set up to +6 on her lead with Mismavor, healing with Pain Split if I got low. I then get a lucky special defense drop which allows 2 Shadow Balls to take out Clefraid. Mismavor then one-shots Dustbloom, Shandybok, Korogros, and then sadly Umzing Sucker Punches me to end the sweep. I bring in Beevor and bring the Umzing low with several Moonblasts, but eventually the poison damage does her in. Luxavor thankfully is able to finish it off with another Moonblast, bringing in Moho. Luxavor brings the legend low with 2 discharges, but a Sacred Flame Venoshock combo knocks us out. But thankfully I bring in Gyarados, who has no issue finishing off that remaining HP. This brings me to Lance. Unfortunately Mismavor gets flinched to death, so I have to bring in my backup sweeper Luxvor. I burn up all of Lance's 4 restores before the Toga Flame U-turns out into Sepdactyl. It brings Luxvor low, but a couple of Moonblasts were enough for Luxvor to claim the win. A Quick Claw proc then allows Luxvor to take out Togiflame. His Chandelier Skarmory fusion then lives on 1 HP as Shadow Ball knocks Luxvor out. I bring in Charvor and accidentally set up a Cold Mind, but it's Air Slash tickles, so a Moonblast takes out the last HP. Dewbat is next, but Flamethrower one-shots it, and then Dark Knight falls to a Moonblast. Agimance then falls to a Moonblast Flamethrower combo, though I didn't mean to click Moonblast on the first turn. Lance definitely had some of the coolest fusions, but he was definitely the easiest battle yet. Which brings me to the toughest battle of the run, the final rival fight. Ninsharp leads the fight and half shots Charvor as Flamethrower brings it down to its Focus Sash. Blue then heals it with a 4 restore, but another Flamethrower is able to one-shot it. A-Ray is next, so I bring in Gardenium as a sack, and sure enough a Stone Edge one-shots her. I then do some Intimidate cycling and I stay in with Luxvor and fire off multiple attacks as we both get pretty low, but Blue uses a 4 restore. Though Luxvor is able to get A-Ray back to yellow HP before fainting. I then bring in Gyarados, but Earthquake isn't doing much damage, so I try to set up a Dragon Dance, but he actually switches into Haxmance. I can't really touch it with Gyarados, so I bring in Beevor, and I land a Moonblast, and then survive a +1 Earthquake on 45 HP, allowing Beevor to fire off another Moonblast, taking out the Haxmance. Blue sends in his own triple fusion who takes Beevor out. I bring in Gyarados who brings the Gen 4 fusion low with multiple Earthquakes before eventually falling to close combat. I'm down to just 2 Pokemon, but Mismaror is able to bring Blue down to just 3 with a Shadow Ball. He then brings in his Runeon, but this thing is super easy to set up against with Mismavor. I get to +6 and then heal myself with Pain Split, and then Moonblast just one-shots it. And then it one-shots Sandevile with a Shadow Ball, and then A-Ray misses a Stone Edge, so one last Moonblast finishes the run, and with that I've beaten Pokemon Infinite Fusion with only Gardevoir fusions. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, maybe check out my Ghost type run or one of my Shiny only runs. But till next time, stay safe and see you all later.